So we are taking the derivative of the tangent of x, and we must show that the derivative of that is equal to the secant square of x. For that, we're going to need to rewrite tangent of x as sine over cosine. So we're going to have d dx as sine of x over the cosine of x. And using the quotient rule that we have over here, the quotient rule for derivatives, then we see that we are going to multiply the lower function, which is cosine of x, multiplied by the derivative of the upper function. In this case, the derivative of the sine is the cosine, so times the cosine of x, minus the upper function, which is just sine x, multiply that by the derivative of the lower function, but the derivative of the lower function, which is cosine of x, gives us minus the sine of x. And of course, everything divided by the denominator square. So in this case would be cosine square of x. All right, if we simplify the numerator, you can see that this becomes cosine square x, and a negative times a negative is a positive, sine square of x, everything over cosine square of x. And if you recall the identity, that the sine square of x plus the cosine square of x is 1. So we have sine square of x plus cosine square of x over here. So that becomes 1 over cosine square of x. And we also know that the reciprocal of the cosine is 1 over secant, or vice versa. The secant of x is defined as 1 over cosine. So here we could do square both sides. We get secant square of x equals 1 over cosine square of x, and we replace this with this here in here. So we have that the derivative of the tangent of x is indeed secant square of x. Now, in a similar fashion, we can take the derivative of the cotangent of x. So the derivative of the cotangent of x is very similar, where we have to substitute, instead of sine over cosine, we have the reciprocal, which is cosine of x over sine of x. And here, this becomes the lower function, in this case is sine x, times the derivative of the upper function, which is, in this case, the derivative of the cosine is minus the sine. So we have minus the sine of x, minus the upper function, which is cosine x, multiplied by the derivative of the lower function, which is, the lower function being the sine of x, we're going to have the multiplied by the cosine of x again, and everything divided by the denominator square, in this case sine square of x. Now, if you can see here, we can simplify this a little bit. This becomes minus the sine square of x minus the cosine square of x over sine square of x. And if you take out a negative or factor out a negative 1, then we have that the sine square of x plus the cosine square of x, everything over sine square. Then this is 1 again, so we end up with 1 over sine square of x, which is the reciprocal of that would be minus, there is a minus 1 here, minus the cosecant square of x. Let me do that a little bit better than that. So this should be cosecant square. So this would be minus cosecant square of x, which is what we were after.